Brand guidelines ensure you know your brand inside and out, as well as anybody else that's going to touch your creative projects. And that's what we're talking about this week in Hard Facts. Hi, I'm Samantha Cunningham Zawilinski, and I want to make sure you have these 6 elements that are imperative to make sure your brand is consistent across any piece of content you or a partner put out there. So let's start with the tone. And as you're developing your brand, tone is really important to understand and identify. So what kind of tone is your content going to have, is your brand going to have? And this is important also in identifying who your audience is going to be. So if you're trying to talk to athletes, you may have one tone versus if you're trying to talk to suburban housewives. Those 2 brands probably look completely different. So think about who your desired audience is, how you communicate and how you want to be perceived, and then create your brand tone. So what's fun is the color scheme. And I say it's fun because who doesn't like to look at color boards, vision boards, and decide, hey, this is what I'm going to look like from here on out. And you want to pick ideally about 5 to 7 colors that you're going to utilize collectively in your brand. And you're going to have about 3 primary colors and no more than 4 secondary colors. And you can break down the thought process between primary and secondary like this. Think about your background colors versus your buttons. Then as you develop your color scheme, get to work on your logo. But once you've developed that logo, you need to have a couple different iterations of it. So it's important to have multiple sizes, multiple file formats, and also have those different color schemes. So you can have one logo, but you can have, let's say, your colors, like Hard Facts, you'll see the logos on the bottom of the screen. We have different iterations of this logo. So if I'm putting on a black background, there's one color, and if I put it on a white background, there's another color. So you can have different variations of that logo, but you also want to make sure that you have where those variations and how those variations can be utilized. Because again, that's keeping to overall brand standards of when to utilize each piece of imagery. And then from there, you also want to talk about the photography. So these are 2 points. One is going to be your brand image. So for example, the brand image for Hard Facts is myself. Now, in your creative, is it that you have yourself in all of your imagery and all of your content? Do you have a frog, for example? We work with a client and their spokesmodel is a frog. Or is it more the type of photography that you use in everything? And that is part 2. So the photography you're utilizing, it's going to be really important that you pinpoint what your brand represents in terms of imagery you're using. So are you always going to be utilizing photography that you and a team has shot? Or are you going to go utilize images from stock photography sites? And here's where I really recommend you do your homework. On the screen, I'll pop up a couple of examples over there of stock photography websites you can take a look at. But these are going to represent different looks and feels. And as you identified that brand tone, correlate that to the tone of the photography that you're going to utilize. So for example, you may want to use clip art type photography, and that is fine. But if you have a very lifestyle brand or a very nature-based brand, clip art may be the ultimate no-no. And last but not least, I leave you with this one comment first. Don't veer here. And I really mean that. Font is what I'm talking about. So often we get captivated in new font types or new examples or new imagery we see other places. But it's really important that on your website, on your branded content, you have really maybe 3 types of font that you're utilizing in different capacities. And what I mean when I say different capacities is as you're bringing a customer through your content, let's say in written form, you have font that is the headline, the sub-headline, and then the content, or a specific font you're using on top of your images. But do not veer from this, because what you're doing essentially is you're coaching your audience how to digest your content through the font that you're using and how you're organizing that font. So often it's easy to say, hey, you know what, I feel like changing it up and using some Comic Sans today. But that doesn't match your brand imagery, your brand guideline, and it's not communicating to your audience how to digest that content. So really think through all of these elements as you're building your brand guidelines. With these 6 pieces, you're sure to make sure your brand is consistent through and through.